Today, as you've perhaps noticed from the email, we want to talk about how long do things last and what do you do? And Jeff and I have agreed to broach the subject and allow you to have a share. I'm going to mute everybody to get started, just to get rid of background noises, but you're able to use your spacebar or alternate A to chime in at the appropriate time. But Jeff, I guess the first question is, when is it time to repair and when is it time to replace? And we were talking about someone in your territory still has a Collins V2 in operation.
I've seen the V2. I posted pictures on Facebook a year or so ago of a McMartin that's still in daytime use 24/7. So, simulated.
Daytime use.
Sorry, it's still in full-time use 24/7. Thank you for that. And yes, simulated wood grain paneling and all. It's awesome. Up here we call that stuff MacTac, shelf paper, and it's really cool to see them. But I kind of look at stuff like that and just shiver a little inside, because what happens when it goes down and the guy who usually fixes it isn't around? And so the thing that I use, and I think you and I had this discussion, we told the story of the SUV that I just replaced a year or so ago, because I took it in and it had lost the power steering. And, my wife drives it when I'm on the road. So she picks me up at the airport one day and she goes, "Truck doesn't steer right." And I said, "What's the matter with it?" She goes, "You really got to work to make it go around a corner." And I said, "Well, that doesn't sound right." So I popped the hood right there in the airport parking lot, checked the power steering fluid, and it is bone dry. Well, being a little resourceful, I usually carry fluids in the back of the truck. So I open the back hatch and go to the little box of fluids, the milk crate full, and grab the one labeled power steering fluid. Took a full quart to get the thing back up to where it should have been. And I said, "Oh, it was bone dry." So we get the power steering fluid up, we get the truck, we hop in, we fire it up, away we go, we get home, everything's good, get out the next morning, turn it over, go to back up, and it didn't want to turn. And it's empty again, and there's a puddle on the ground, and I said, "Oh, this is not good." So I call my buddy Terry up at the garage right beside Nautel, and I say, "Terry, I need to bring the truck in." He goes, "What's the matter?" And I said, "The steering doesn't." And he goes, "Oh, well, it should." And I said, "I know." So I get it in there. And the great thing is with his garage, we can drop it off and then we walk down to the plant. It's about half a mile away, and get a little bit of exercise and get your vehicle fixed all at the same time. But I drop it off and I go back the end of the day to pick it up. And I said, "So did you get it all done?" And he says, "Well," now, you got to know my mechanic, because if you know Terry, you'll know that "well" usually means we're about to add some zeros to what you thought this is going to cost. And that, he goes, "The problem is," he goes, "the power steering system, there's crossover lines between the left and right side of the axle to equalize the pressure as you turn." And I'm getting the phrases wrong. I know I'm definitely not a power steering mechanic by any stretch, or any other kind of mechanic. So he says, the hoses that do that equalization are leaking. And I said, "So $50 for a couple of hoses, right?" "Well, you'd like to think so, but Dodge won't sell you just the hoses. You've got to buy the whole power steering rack." And I said, "Well, how much is that?" "Well, the last one I did was about $1,500. I said, "Ouch, that's getting up there on a 10-year-old vehicle with 200 and some odd thousand miles on it. But okay, so 1,500 and it'll be good to go for a couple of years." "Well," and it's like, "I don't like the way this is going." He goes, "Well," he goes, "one of your wishbones is almost rusted through, and both your ball joints are shot." And he says, "Oh, and tie rod ends." And he starts to say "and" again. I hold up my hand and I said, "How much to get it running so it'll be reliable for the next 3 to 4 years?" And he said, "If I was guessing, about $5,000. And the little mental accountant said, okay, we passed the black book value of this truck about 3 times already. It's time. So it got a new vehicle. That was an easy decision to make. The problem is, and this is where I want y'all's input, the problem is that it's easy to fix a little thing, and then that leads you to the next little thing, and you fix the next little thing, and that leads you to the next little thing. And $5,000 down the wormhole, it's still not working, but you think you're just one more little thing away. Where do you draw the line?
And we don't have to limit this just to transmitters or
No,
SUVs.
things in general. I mean, for me,
Alrighty.
my general ballpark is I shoot for 10%. If 10% of the replacement price is what I'm budgeting per year, that's too much.
Okay.
If you really love the vehicle, I suppose that would weigh in. If you're just, if it's a vehicle that you just adore and can't bear the idea of replacing it, that changes the dynamic.
I think what really changes it is the loss of the ability to get replacement parts, unobtainium.
Correct.
That definitely factors in now.
Yep.
I mean, I can go to any scrapyard and find a power steering rack off a 2009 Dodge Nitro without too much of a challenge, but then it becomes an investment of time. So, it's always, everything comes down to time and money. You've got to have both.
Sometimes it gets more complicated if you have an item that itself is not replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got a matter of, okay, at what point do I draw the line between buying replacement parts, which may be very expensive because it is not available for the most part, and just scrapping the whole thing. But what do you do when you scrap it?
Yeah. And, there's that. Beyond that, and I alluded to it earlier, there's skill set. If I've got an old McMartin in Wisconsin, for example, I know I can call John Zeckerly or Eric Bernstad or any one of 3 or 4 guys who are very familiar with those older transmitters. But there are going to be times when they're all busy because they've all got day jobs. And at that point, and it comes back to, like you said, what's the cost of not having that thing working?
The last time I did this with my primary vehicle, which was fairly old, it's kind of subjective, but at some point I said, you know what, the reliability is starting to get to the point where, we drive for a few weeks and then something else goes wrong, and then I got to deal with that. And then when it gets to a point where I can't really trust it anymore, when I start it in the morning, it's going to get me where I need to go. That's the point I definitely say, okay, time to change out the vehicle.
Right. And it's like you say, it's subjective, but it's one of those, I've got to have confidence that when I turn the key, it'll start. And when I put it in gear, it'll go and keep going until I get to where I want to be and then get back. And the same thing holds true of the equipment. And I mean, like I said, a prime example, we were talking about it a little before. In my infinite spare time, I help out with engineering duties at a local community station, Cove FM. And today, in the middle of the downpour that was Ida, and I don't know whether they got power bumps or not, I haven't looked yet, but it decided to throw out a power supply. So we're sitting there off the air while Jamie, our GM, goes out to Nautel and gets a power supply and gets back to meet me so we can bushwhack it up 3 miles of muddy trail to get to the transmitter. And, for us, that's a much bigger priority because there's no backup transmitter. And you'd think the guy that preaches backups would practice what he preaches a little more, but what do they say? The pipes get fixed last. So, that'll be next week's discussion at our board meeting, is a little bit of a backup to that particular part of the air chain. And again, you're going to tend to put more priority on keeping something running if it's the only thing you've got bringing in revenue, I would assume.
A little anecdote just for fun. And Barry's old radio site has some nifty pictures of this, by the way, if anyone wants to explore it. KRLA, when I first started working there in the 70s and 80s, had a Western Electric transmitter for an aux that was circa 1943. And they kept that silly thing going forever. What finally finished it was Cal Tube Labs could no longer rebuild the finals properly. We couldn't get new tubes for the finals. Interestingly, another little story, the reason they couldn't is because the fellow that used to rebuild them died. And apparently he took the secret of how to do it with him. And after that, they couldn't seem to rebuild one properly. So that's when it finally ended for that 1943 Western Electric.
Yeah. And well, as an example, when Peter Dahl died, I mean, you know, that company went away. Freeland Tubes got acquired by Econco when their founder went away. And I mean, you know, more recently, what's going on with the folks over at BW? I mean, it's just, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge everywhere.
Well,
So,
I
always have
and
backup.
you talk about McMartin, you know, when we lost Charlie Goodrich here in Omaha, that hurt. And then Dick Dennis recently passed away. There are a few guys that worked over at McMartin still around, but they do other work and other lines of work and kind of been away from the transmitter business for a while.
yeah.
That's Marvin Collins in that picture, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
it
thought
is.
of another factor that goes into the decision, and it has to do with it has to do with what capabilities would a new piece of equipment give me that I don't have now that can make me money or not cost me as much.
And that's actually a great segue into something that I just put up on my other screen. Yeah, because there are two things to factor into this. And so coincidentally, I have a spreadsheet. But there's total cost of operation, which is what I've got shown here just as an example. And we're certainly happy to provide this spreadsheet. You can actually get to it on our website if you do operation cost in the little search bar or something like that. And I hope I'm sharing the right screen. Are you seeing the one that shows the spreadsheet?
Yes, sir.
Good. So, and I mean, this is just an example right here of nominal cost savings at the 10 kilowatt level between an Eco 10 and one of our NV10 LTs. And the challenge is, you know, people ask me to do this all day long, and I can guess at efficiencies, but if you can give me actual measured current draw, I can get that stuff pretty darned exact. And this particular one is pretty darned exact. It's based off measured numbers. So, you know, that's an example depending, and we'll break it down by kilowatt hour, electricity cost, et cetera, and so on, and tube prices per year, whatever. And I say, this is just one example, but right off the bat, in 5 years, you've pretty much paid the price of a new transmitter on the power bill. So yeah, you know, that absolutely, Richard, that's an excellent point. And the other thing that factors into it, and I use this one if I'm comparing air cooled to liquid cooled, cost of acquisition, because some transmitters will cost more, you know, and then you get into the juggling act. Well, do I get more for more? Because, you know, we're definitely not the cheapest one in the game by any stretch. So, you know, what justifies that higher cost? So yeah, the cost of operation and cost of acquisition are the two big things. And you know, I hate to pump up the competition, but the folks at Gates Air did a pretty good paper. I forget who it was, might have been Rich, I can't remember now, did a pretty good paper on cost of ownership. And that's what they were looking at, both acquisition and operation. Because, you know, there's how much to buy it. And, you know, I bought this new truck, I bought a big old Chevy Silverado, well, paid a lot more for it, but it's brand new, it's got a warranty, and that's all great. So the cost of acquisition wasn't terrible. Turns out that it's got this, you know, it switches cylinders in and out depending on the load. And the gas mileage on it's actually 5 miles to a gallon better than the Dodge SUV that it replaced. So my cost of operation has gone down as well.
That's the problem with the 20V.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and on those ones, the cost of operation, the other thing that does not factor in here, and this is what I mentioned it earlier, and I've beat this drum over and over, especially when you're talking to engineers who are frustrated with not being able to speak to management. And it's because we speak watts, ohms, amps, volts. They speak dollars, cents, and ROI. And until you become bilingual and learn to speak both engineer and management, then it's not quite the same. Mark's laughing; he knows where I was going with that one. But you basically, the thing I tell folks is something like this. You can break it down into dollars and cents very fast. And that's provable, and something that, with the right information, you can make it extremely accurate. And there are going to be times, like with our little 1 kilowatt as an example, if a new little 1 kilowatt came out that was 20% more efficient at that power level, unless the thing was $100, I'm not going to save enough to make a difference in the power bill. As a volunteer station, our off-air time, it has a value, but it's pretty minimal. So, for us, the backup, while it's something we need, it's not as high a priority as it would be if I was one of the big commercial stations in town where I've got an audience 10 times what I have where I am. And that's kind of where I was going earlier. You need to know whether it's non-commercial or commercial, public, private, don't care. You need to know the value of the product, the value of the airtime. What does it cost you to be off air for a minute, for an hour, for a day, for a week? Because if you've got that information right at hand, then you can start assigning value to the stuff that, we would usually consider intangible. I can't tell you what it's worth to us to be off the air. Oh yeah, I very much can. If I'm billing $100,000 a year, it's not that hard to figure out how many seconds in a year and tell you exactly how many dollars a second. Opened up, I'll give you an example. And so many years ago, not too many years ago, and I see Mike Tosh is here, and I know that Chris is here, so the West Coast guys. I think it was KIIS was one of the top billers for a few years running out west. And
Yes.
going back about 10 or 15 years ago, they published their billing schedule, and as part of the showing how much they billed per year. And I took that and I divided it down by 364 and a quarter, divided by 24, divided by 60, divided by 60. And when I sent that over to customer service, and I said, the reason that these guys get so torqued when it takes you an hour and a half to call them back is that they're losing this many dollars for every second they're off air. Not minute, not hour, second. And that really got some people's attention, because they never caught on to the fact that when somebody's calling them in a panic and being kind of rude about it, that there's a reason for that, that it's not just because they're, kind of a peckerhead or whatever. So
that's also the reason they were allowed to build a really elegant backup site completely independent of Mount Wilson.
Right. And I mean, it's not just them, like WBAP, the Disney in San Francisco. I can't remember. Bruce Shermer had a lot to do with that one. Anyway, they typically, when they bought one of anything, they bought two of that thing. And I know Bruce told me at one time that if they were off air for more than 3 seconds, he had serious explaining to do. So, they took it serious, and they had the budgets to make it happen. Now, we don't all have those budgets. Like I said, my budget for operating our station for a year is probably a lot less than most stations' budget for a couple of months or weeks.
Now I'm going to cover 2 points here that you kind of one glossed over, because I know you don't want this to be a overly commercialized Nautel spot, but I will bring it to you. At about 5 kilowatts and above, would you say the electricity is what pays for the new transmitter?
So I'll give you an example, and this is, I like this story because, number one, it makes me look good instead of stupid, which is the way most of my other stories roll. But I walked into a site down in the deep south one day, and you get down there, and the power rates are not that low, but they're not Tennessee low. They're up in the 10 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour, depending where you are and what utility. And we were looking at replacing it was a 5 kilowatt, and it was old, like a 40s, 50s. I want to say it was a BC1 or a BC5A, but I don't remember for sure. So I think it was an old RCA, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so I had done the spreadsheet that I just showed, and it came up with very similar numbers. They were a little higher because our AMs are more efficient than our FMs. But yeah, the savings were very literally enough that it would have paid the power bill. It would have paid the lease. And I'd done this spreadsheet, and I'd gone to our lease company and got to work out for the monthly payments. And sure enough, the monthly payments were less than the power savings without even factoring in the parts. And so I went to the owner, and the owner, of course, all he saw was the big number at the bottom of the quote. He didn't see the monthly. He didn't see any of that. He saw the big number at the bottom of the quote, and I can't afford that. I said, well, you lease it. Well, I don't like leasing stuff. Well, I understand. I'm not a big fan of beholden to somebody else either. But if you're paying the lease off the power bill, then, once that lease is paid off in 5 years, you're putting money in the bank. And even then, it worked out in his particular case. I think that the savings on the electricity were about $100 more per month than the lease payment. So he would actually been making money at the same time. And all he saw was that big number. And so I was new to sales and still got dejected. I didn't have the tough skin that I've got now. Well, no, it's not that I have a tough skin. I'm just getting old enough that I don't care as much about being rejected anyway. But this is all fine. I'm walking out the door, head hanging low, laptop slung over the shoulder, and this guy's coming in, and he sees my shirt, and he goes, "Nautel, what's that?" I go, "Transmitter company." He goes, "Oh, is he buying a new transmitter?" And I said, "No, he didn't like the price." And he goes, "Well, would it save him any money or help him anyway?" And I said, "Well, that's kind of a business discussion. I don't know you." He goes, "Oh, well, I'm his accountant." And I said, "Oh, well, in that case, yeah, it'd save him about $100 a month over and above what he's paying out now if he leased it." He goes, "Oh, do you got time for a coffee?" I said, "Shoot, yeah, I got nothing else to do today." And he goes, "Well, meet me around the corner. It's a coffee shop. We'll have a donut, and you can tell me this." So I go around the corner, and a couple of minutes later, he comes in, he sits down, and we get talking, and I show him the spreadsheets and stuff. And he goes, "Can I have these?" And I said, "Absolutely, sure thing." He goes, "Okay, cool." And he gets on his way, and I get on I-59 and head on down toward through Mississippi. I think I was headed back to Louisiana at the point. And couldn't have been more than 2 hours later, my phone rings, and the owner calls me. It's the owner of the station. He goes, "Yeah, I just changed my mind. I think I want to buy that transmitter." I said, "Well, cool, thanks. I'll get you a quote and get you all set up." I said, "Just out of curiosity, what made you change your mind?" He goes, "About an hour after you left, my accountant came in late for a meeting, walked into my office, held out $100 bill, said, 'I just took this out of the station's bank account, lit it on fire, dropped it on my desk, told me he was going to do that every month until I bought the damn transmitter.'"
Very good story.
It doesn't happen often, but and this was an extreme. I mean, for the most part, you're not going to make the full lease payments on a new transmitter purchase with the power savings, but there are going to be a few.
I'll also mention one other thing, and we talked about unobtainium as being one of the reasons for upgrading a transmitter or an audio processor or whatever. And Nautel is truly interesting in this regard, that you will support and adapt any of your transmitters today.
With respect to what?
Making it work.
Well, yeah, no, that's kind of our job. It is, well, and I mean, I say that kind of flippantly, but no, we do take that pretty seriously. I was joking earlier, well, not joking, but KLEB, the AM in outside of New Orleans, they're over toward I can't even remember what town they're in, but west of New Orleans anyway, that got hit by Ida so hard and that AMFET 5 that just got destroyed. And it's like, I know I can rebuild that transmitter. I know I can get all the parts for it. If I had to replace a modulator instead of rebuilding one, that's going to cost an arm and a leg, and it wouldn't be cost effective, because just tooling up to fabricate the stuff that we've always done, you know, manually, with everything being automatic, it's it's just not something that's really, like I said, cost. I mean, those modulators are way up there, but I can still make them if I need to.
Yeah, or if insurance is paying for it to crunch. This is, of course, in contrast, and again, don't want to dump on Gates Air, although you just pump them up with their paper. You can't get service support for an MW1 or an SX5 or go ahead and add to that.
You know, I mean, a lot of it, they have a little different philosophy on parts availability than we do. We very literally spend millions of dollars a year sourcing replacement parts for the old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a difference. Now, having said that, I mean, if you call them up and you get Walter, or you get, the other older guy, Ralph, you know, they're going to be able to help you out, and they'll help you as much as they can.
Sure.
And they are very good.
I'm
going to do a diversion here for just a moment, because I see Marvin jumped in to visit us. So I'm going to bring that back so he can see himself as he was and as we remember him.
Oh, for goodness sakes, Barry! I remember that picture. That goes back to somewhere, I think, somewhere around 1970. I'm going to guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really something. And so
I remember I was on duty at the transmitter all by myself, so I set up my camera on a tripod and used the self timer to run over there and get in the picture. But that was the old Continental water cooled transmitter.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about the WE, actually, and then I popped your picture up there, and I wanted, bring it back up because you came into us. But this is the one that, where is it here? I think this is the one that Chris wanted me to look at and show. That was the
old Western Electric, yeah.
That they just didn't make the tubes anymore.
No, we had to, that's right. We had to always get them rebuilt. You couldn't buy those tubes new anymore.
And then I'm going to bring this one. I'm going to bring this one in.
And eventually we couldn't get them rebuilt either.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring this in for two reasons. One, the console there is a GE console that we replaced when Mike Dorota and I built a brand new control room console for KRLA. And around the same time, or a year later, you'll notice a stack of cart machines. And management did a very strange thing. They decided to get rid of the studio staff. And the transmitter engineers who, well, they had nothing to do other than read base currents at 6 towers. They were now loading the cart machines. And Marvin had rigged up this very interesting remote control scheme so that the buttons on the board at the studio actually started the cart machines at the transmitter site. And of course, nobody would ever figure out how to do that today.
Well, Barry,
is that a mod monitor in your board there?
Barry, what I was going to say, what happened on that remote control system was that I just happened to have a friend, that ham radio friend, that worked for Press Wireless up in Belmont, California. And they had shut the place down, and they were getting rid of some surplus teletype terminal units that they used on their shortwave transmitters. And I got thinking about that and realized that those same tones could go down a telephone line, all be combined on one telephone, on one audio circuit. And it was bi-directional. So when you would put a card in, it would light the appropriate light up at the studio, so the talent would know which machine was loaded. And when he would push the button, it would fire the appropriate cart machine. And as I recall, that audio circuit was a digital circuit. And every once in a while, the phone company would lose sync and we get a blast of noise, which made all the lights light, all the carts fire, and it was a mess. But that didn't happen very often. But basically, the system worked quite good. And then a number of years later, after I had left and gone to KFI, I think Chris Hayes knows they found some kind of a little solid state unit that did the job in much less space and so on. Because the one stuff I put in was all tube type equipment that had probably been designed back in the 50s. But then I think, Chris, you can talk about it. Whatever it was you found there that did that solid state, it was a pretty cute little device that replaced what I put in.
Well, I don't know how much time I want to take with this grand story. I was going to point out the little buttons between the carts, which was another creation of yours. Back in the racks out of view was a very old Schaefer audio clock that had been repurposed. And if you push that button, you could put the time check between two carts. So we actually had a time check of availability on this tail chaser.
Oh, I kind of forgotten about that.
And that, folks, was 1972 that Marvin built all that. And it kind of plays into what we're talking about. How long does it last? Who could repair that today to make it work?
Well, thank goodness technology made it all obsolete.
Yes.
Well, and that's kind of what I come back to. The two things that we look at are number one, is there something newer, better, shinier to replace it? And number two, do we really need that newer, better, shinier thing? And there's always going to be a point when the answer to both those questions is yes. And the judgment call, the subjective part, as Chris said, is figuring out when we've hit that point. And like I say, for me, I try to bring it to numbers as much as I can because numbers are what I speak. And I like 10 to 15% of the replacement price, but like Chris said, sometimes there's a viable reason that you won't replace. You know, if my car had been a 57 Bel Air hardtop, I guarantee you a $5,000 repair bill wouldn't have got it out of yard as fast as it did that Dodge Nitro. I knew Barry was going to be showing off that button eventually. He was talking about it ahead of time. We got to bring those back.
I have a few.
Now, the other thing that comes down to this, and this is a drum I beat a lot, and it's one of the things that I know all the engineers in the room are like going to nod their heads, but the more maintenance you do on stuff, the longer you can stretch out that time before you have to replace it. And, you know, I mean, keeping it clean, well, what's my line always been? Keep it cool, keep it clean, keep it well grounded. But the big deal is that if you're not doing regular maintenance runs, then you run into the chance of running into something like this. And let's hit the share button here. And this one came to me from a customer in Minnesota last week. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a toasty wire situation going on there.
Oh, that's a good one.
And he did like I did. You walk in, you grab your infrared camera, you scan all your current carrying stuff. And when you see something like that, you stop and you assess a little further. Ooh. And then you see something like that. And what he ended up doing, let's see, I don't want to give away the customer because, you know, I haven't got his permission to show his stuff. So we'll keep the personally identifiable stuff out of there. But yeah, it's just amazing the stuff that you run into like that. And what they found out in their particular case was somebody had stolen the neutral wire. And
they're fortunate they didn't have a fire.
Well, so the neutral wire was gone, and that's when they discovered that the ground system was also gone. And they don't know whether they both disappeared at the same time or they disappeared at two totally separate times. But they found out about this. What caused caused him to be there to take this was when he got a notification that the transmitter was off air. And the transmitter power metering showed him that the ambient air temperature in the room was 150.4 degrees. And that'd be Fahrenheit degrees, but I don't care when you translate that to Celsius, it's still darn hot. And so he went up to the site and discovered that the door was almost hot enough to raise a blister, the doorknob. And that's what the situation was. The transmitter, the air conditioner had totally gone down because there was no neutral. And for the transmitter, it didn't care. We only look at phase to phase, so it's not an issue until you get a little bit of lightning or imbalance current. And then bad things would have happened and it would have got really expensive. So he's lucky he got up there when he did. But again, regular maintenance runs are crucial to keeping stuff living longer.
That's become a real problem since the advent of solid state transmitters. Managers don't think that they need to send the engineer out there regularly.
The problem, and it is a challenge, because when our stuff fails, typically it lights a little red light and things keep chugging along, and you know you've got something to fix, but yeah, I'll get around to it someday. And then that red light becomes 2 red lights, becomes 3 red lights, and by the time it does go down, you've got major problems on your hands. And I've had that call. I couldn't tell you how. I had one last week like that. He goes, yeah, we're off the air. I said, what's your problem? Well, all the PAs are failed. Okay, what happened? Because all the PAs don't fail in that particular transmitter ever. And he goes, well, no, we had one come on a year or so ago, and I told myself I'd get around to it, and I never thought about it. And I was out there doing something on the blower a couple of months later and discovered there were 4 of them lit. I never got around to it. And then I was out there a couple of months after that to cut the grass, and I saw that there were 7 or 8 of them lit. And I thought I really should get something done. And I meant to call you. And then I got back to the studio and one of the automation systems was down and I forgot. And then today it went down and all 12 of them are lit. And it's like, well, you know, at that point, you can only drive with the oil light on so long.
A stitch in time, as the Ben Franklin quote is, I think.
Just about exactly. In this case, the stitch and sign probably would have almost literally saved 9. And so anyway, we got them fixed up with a whole lot of really expensive exchange modules, and then we got digging around. Turns out somebody had stolen his ground system, so he was running through lightning season without any lightning protection, and it just kept blowing up a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time, and he just kept letting it blow up a little more and a little more and a little more. It's like, you know what, when your tire pressure indicator comes on, it doesn't mean you drive till all 4 tires are equally flat. Bill asked what happens when you put the wrong cart in the wrong position, talking about Marvin's cart automation. And that reminds me of the stories of the transmitters where we had one guy call us one day where one particular cart and one particular cart machine had enough base oomph on it to trip the transmitter because of the DC offset on the audio.
I think Harry Nielsen's Jump Into the Fire would do that if you weren't careful. That bass run at the beginning of it would sometimes dump transmitters.
We did and I've told this story here before, I'm sure, but we did a factory test. The customer wanted to do 150% positive mod test. And the only way to get that kind of asymmetry at the time with the stock gear we had was to basically put a diode across the negative side of the audio to clip it and then turn it up even further. And so that's what we did. Well, at 150% positive mod, Michael Jackson's Beat It came on the reel-to-reel we were using for an audio source. And this big sheet of blue flame comes shooting out the bottom of the transmitter. We tripped every breaker in the test room. That was fun times.
Interesting indeed. As we think about these older units and things that become unobtainium, there actually is an article that Mike Patton wrote for me some years back, which needs to be updated. And if you have any current favorite items that are unobtainium, I'd appreciate an email or contact later on. But what I want to broach in a little bit here, Jeff, and that is when cheap products are not always cheap. And this applies, again, not just to transmitters. There is a certain console manufacturer, starts with an A, that makes or used to make good furniture. And I had a GM tell me one day, look, I bought a new console and it's only cost me. And I looked at him and I said, in the next 6 months, it will cost you more in repair bills than you paid for that console. He's, oh no, that can't possibly be.
Oh, yes, it can.
It can or did.
Well, and that comes down to there's definitely a pay now or pay later type scenario. I mean, there are some things that are priced more economically. You know, you can get some transmitters for less than ours and they'll have fewer features. And if you don't need those features, that's fine. It is really, really critical, I think, to look at the support. Both near term and long term. And again, you know, we've had challenges there as well as everybody else does. So, but you definitely want to look at that. You want to be sure they've got 24/7 support. And I mean, you know, one of the legacy companies in our industry is not providing 24/7 support anymore. So it does change as people change. Mary's got a good point in here that some products are throwaways. You know, there are some things, surge protectors. We provide 2 surge protectors. We've got a cheap one by a company I can't remember. Not that I don't want to call them out, just I literally don't remember. But it's $250. It's very literally an MOV with an epoxy case and a pigtail in a box. And when it fails, you throw it away and you buy another one. Or we've got the good one made by Raycap, one of the Rayvos Strike Sword product lines that's $1,800, but that one is fully repairable, and I guarantee you it will go through a lot more crap than the cheap one will. And it's got a 10-year warranty, plus Raycap will provide some level of confidence that they're quite sure they're going to protect the stuff behind it if it's properly installed. So yeah, absolutely. You know, well, what's the running joke? You know, you can buy a Yugo or you can buy a Lincoln. They'll both get you down the road for a little while.
A lot of people used to say the reason that they would buy a Bernie box was because A, it was cheap, and B, it was repairable by people that didn't know very much.
And C, you could get all the parts at Ace Hardware.
On a good day.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's not untrue, and it is accurate. Now I'll quantify that. A Bernie box is a good box if you can fix it without relying on the schematics.
What schematics?
Oh, there'll be schematics. They just won't match, but that's okay. They're, you know, again, the people that know it, and I've worked with several of them, can fix them in their sleep. They're not a bad transmitter. They are pretty rugged. You know, they're not efficient, but grounded grid technology is stable for the most part. So again, though, you can't get parts for them as easily as you could. You certainly can't get factory support now that the doors are closed. So yeah, again, you make the judgment call.
I went to work for Bernie for a week, and my first goal was to finish the manuals. And that lasted a week. But it's a beautiful little town up there.
So
yeah, they were pretty unhappy when his son shut everything down, walked away, left them with a $500,000 note
to the city.
Yeah.
So there was an interesting little side note. I was at a show, might have been TAB, I can't remember now, but Bernie and George Marty were standing beside each other, and I walked by and tossed something over and I don't know what fuse I lit, but boy, it got really entertaining really fast, and I just made a hasty exit. But Bernie was, he was one of those characters. He'd call every couple of months and we'd just shoot the breeze for a little while. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was like talking to, I am having a brain fart. No, Leonard Cohen.
Oh yeah.
Leonard used to call me once a month just to talk about stuff. And
he liked George.
Oh yeah. Well, they're all three of them. They were just legends like that because they knew what they knew, and they knew it better than almost anybody.
One reason I only stayed a week was I told him, talk to George about taxes, because they were paying those New York taxes. They were in an old prison is where their actual building was in. And I said, you can move down and buy George's old building in Cleburne, Texas, because they had sold to PE. And the taxes are 1/10 of what you're paying in New York. And he was thinking about doing it. And then his son came in and said, what are you telling my dad? And that was the end of that deal.
At the same time, something that you did say, Jeff, with Bernie at room temperature, there's a lack of support. And that's something that pervades a large part of the industry. Right now, you mentioned the McMartian transmitter, that now that Charlie Goodrich has passed away. And as Mark Voris pointed out, there's nobody that took that over. So that's done. What else? The Vector transmitters that Dave Gorman built, they're gone. Omnitronics is gone. All the Omnitronics paperwork and manuals, they went into a dumpster when LPB was shut down by Tom Spadea.
Yeah, and I'll say more recently, I mean, now BW's got the doors closed, at least temporarily, while they sort out estates and so on. And I mean, the big challenge, and this is a question that you really never think of asking a company when you reach out to them for an initial quote on something, but ask them what kind of succession plan they have. Because I mean, like you take, and we've been kind of picking on Gates Air today. I like to think I try not to pick on them, but I mean, they're have the, I guess in this case, almost an advantage where they're owned by venture capitalists. There's not really any one person that could cripple them in that regard. Now with us, we are privately owned and we have a single owner, but one of the things we have is a very clear succession plan, so that if Kevin were to get hit by a bus, on, you know, God forbid, because I actually like him. He's one of my favorite bosses.
So why did you buy a bus?
You weren't supposed to tell. That was supposed to be our secret. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, we do keep plans. I was talking to one guy one day and we got talking. He goes, well, what happens if the plane crashed on the way to NAB? And I said, wouldn't have be an issue for us, because we're not allowed to have more than 2 senior management team members on the same flight. You know, I mean, it's just part of our plan to make sure that we are always here. And it's not something you ever hear about. It's just something we do, you know, but that's the kind of question that you can also ask if you get down into a nuts and bolts conversation between 2 suppliers on something.
That's not exactly true, because if you remember back in the day when Dielectric had those 2 people on the flight to Quincy, so that strategy of separating out your head people in travel is very essential for a company. Yeah.
And that's what I say for us. I mean, now I can get on a flight with anybody because, you know, I could be replaced in a heartbeat, but yeah, the people that actually make the decisions that run the place, they try to keep those as isolated as possible when it comes to travel.
That's what happened to Curtis Matthews televisions.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time, I think it was, that I went to an NAB, got on a plane at it was probably Burbank Airport here, and almost every chief engineer in Los Angeles was on that plane. And we were all thinking, oh boy, if this plane goes down, LA's going to be in a world of hurt.
Yep. And I mean, you know, with us, we're, I guess, geographically isolated way up here in the Atlantic Ocean. So that's less a scenario for us. But again, same deal. When it comes down to flying to Vegas, you won't see our CEO, CFO, and head of sales all on the same airplane or in the same rental car or on the same whatever. Pick your public transit.
Kind of a thought too.
I use the same philosophy, and I send my kids in a different car whenever we have to go somewhere.
Well, that's just so you can't answer the questions. When are we getting there, David?
You just don't want to be in the same Yeah,
I think it's
get
more to do
Dave.
with peace and quiet. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and not buying any more ice cream.
And by the way, Jeff, I'm the king of unobtainium. I still drive a Saab.
Are we there yet?
So as we think about support, and I'll just toss this to anybody that is with us today. What problems do you have in getting support from a manufacturer, or perhaps you have seen some improvements from some of the manufacturers in recent years when they've implemented the internet, for instance, for contact, but the 3 a.m. phone call, not as easy as it used to be.
See, I think that's
There's
the only
one
thing we're still
vendor-
doing the same.
Yeah. I was going to say there's one vendor that I deal with for satellite receivers, and they're German, and their factory is in Germany, and everything is in Germany. And initially, they promised they were going to set up a U.S. support base, and guess what? They never did. And my client, I've advised my client that we need to start thinking about what to do, because it's like what would happen with Nautel if you didn't have a shipping depot on this side of the border. You get the customs details, and shipping time adds to the length of time if you do have to send something back, or if they have to send something to you.
Yeah. Outbound isn't as bad as it was 10, 15 years ago. Usually we can do overnight from Halifax to anywhere in North America, but there can be issues on occasion for sure. And yeah, if you had to send something back for repair, if you had to send it up to Halifax, what a pain in the ass that would be, which is part of why we have that Bangor facility. The other advantage is the Memphis warehouse, so we can get stuff out. You know, I mean, you can call me at 8 p.m. Central and I can have parts on your doorstep at 10 o'clock the next morning. You know, assuming you've got morning delivery wherever you may happen to be. The great thing about Memphis, and this is something a lot of folks don't know, but I was in Little Rock working on a 50 kilowatt one day, called the support guys at I think about 3 o'clock on 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And I said, I need a couple of backplanes. This particular site, I did a grounding presentation last week, and it featured quite prominently as a site that didn't have any. Anyway, so I said, I need a couple of backplanes. You know, we're basically off the air, and I'd like to have them on by morning so I can get back to the airport and get out of here and go on to the next thing. And they said, well, yeah, okay, we've got them in Memphis. How far are you? I said, 2-hour drive. And they said, go. They'll be there when you get there. And I said, I won't be there till 6 or 7. They said, don't matter. They're open till midnight. So I hopped in the car, head to Memphis, grabbed the parts from their warehouse, stopped at Corky's, grabbed Too Much Barbecue, managed to stay awake for the 2 hours back to Little Rock, and had it back on the air by 2 o'clock in the morning.
One of the things that's really bad about stations that use either consumer or prosumer items in their studios is that you can't get the parts, and the manufacturers don't even want to sell the parts to fix them.
You know, I had an issue with the transmitter regarding a power supply, and I couldn't get the parts for probably 3 weeks because they were out of stock. It's pretty tough when you have to hear them tell you that, well, we got to wait for them. They're coming from China.
Well, it's nice that Nautel has built more into this country. In 1982, that wasn't the case. We had a power supply failure, and it had to come from Canada, and it took a couple of days, actually. It was kind of a stupid station. We installed an AMPFET 1, but I wanted to put a switcher in, and they decided to sell their BC1T. And they took it out the same day that we were putting the AMPFET 1 on.
And see, I'm here to tell you, and I'm a big fan, of course, of new technology. I make money every time I sell some, and I love that stuff. But if you got a perfectly working old thing and you're going to put in a new thing, you keep the old thing, because eventually the new thing won't be working. And now beyond that, not only do you keep the old thing, you test the old thing on a very regular basis, because, you know, a backup's only as good as the last time you saw it running.
Well, remember last week when Gordon was telling us about backups and making sure that you checked your backup from time to time, or your computer may just decide not to function anymore.
Jeff, what's your thoughts about, and I hear this different things from different people, but what kind of a lifespan does a person on the average want to put on a transmitter before one thinks about actually replacing it? I've heard 20 years, but.
So I like the way you put, what kind of lifespan does a person want to put on? If you're the typical radio station GM in the US, about 50 years, maybe 60. Well, that's what they want to put on. What's realistic? We design for a nominal 15-year support cycle. So, you know, we assume, well, we very literally on our government contracts, we commit to being able to provide parts and or plug-in form, fit, and function replacements for a minimum of 15 years from date of sale.
But those AmFed ones are now almost 40.
They were first built in 1985. So, yep, you're getting into that ballpark. The NTB 200 50-watt AM radios that we built off a directional beacon for the CBC Great or Far North, of which some are still on the air, were first built in 1973. And we can still replace the PAs on those. The only thing we can't get is the crystal ovens. So there you go. But yeah, so to get back to Mark's question, we designed for 15 years. I assume that anything I sell will be on air for at least 20 years. Now I'm going to qualify that, and I'm going to look at the NV series transmitters, which we released in 2008, sorry. So those two transmitters, the NV and the NX, came out the same year. We're still supporting them 100%. The NVs, as we were talking about earlier with Ken, are on their second power supply iteration, and swapping out those supplies just got a little more expensive. The single board computer that runs those two boxes is on its 5th or 6th iteration, because as we all know, a computer's got a nominal design life of about the moment you buy the first one, it's obsolete. So yeah, we do, and again, that's what I said. We very literally spend about $2 million a year sourcing replacement parts. So, and that's not just for obsolete stuff. I mean, these days with the, I mean, everybody's heard about product deliveries going way up. We were talking earlier about how my car dealer, who have a lot that'll hold 500 cars, has got a grand total of 12 of them on the lot as of 2 days ago, because they can't get a car to save their souls, because they're all parked outside of Louisville, Kentucky, waiting for one IC to go in the radio. So, you know, that's a very much an ongoing thing. The company that makes, it's like 75 to 90% of the ADCs, analog digital converter chips used worldwide in Japan, burned down or had a major fire of some sort about a year or so ago. So yeah, parts are harder to get, and we're spending a whole lot more in sourcing alternates, both to keep our own production going and to keep your older stuff going.
But you know, your new transmitters are basically computers, and it's like you look at a new car, the dashboard is a monitor screen. So 20 years from now, you'll still be able to maybe find a speedometer for a 1965 Mustang. Right. But you won't be able to get that monitor screen anywhere for that Nissan.
And that's what separates this is coming back to Barry's topic about, do you buy cheap or do you buy good? And you can get cheap and good, but can you get cheap and good that it will have somebody who's willing to invest what it takes to source a substitute for that monitor screen 15 years from now? Because one of the big things that you pay for when you buy our gear is the fact that we are going to support the dickens out of this thing. And that does obviously have a cost. You know, we love y'all, but we don't work for free.
Two things. First of all, Jeff, I don't think the Amphet one was 85. I think it was more on the order of 83.
Okay, Amphet 50 was 85. And
Yeah.
since I sent you that list, I'm going to assume I knew what I was talking about.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Jeff. The other thing is I made a mistake, and it wasn't Gordon, it was Wayne, Mr. Messina, who gave us the advice about backups last week, and he deserves the credit for that comment.
Yeah. Now, one other thing, though, too, talking back to Mark's question about lifespans. So the transmitter is one small part of the picture. And like, especially if you're running HD, you're connected to an HD multicast for us, or a FMXI for Gates Air, and FSI 10 for BE. I don't care whose brand you got. And I mean, some of them will sell, oh, it's an embedded device, it's not a computer. Yeah, it's still a computer. And a computer, if you're projecting a 20-year lifespan for a computer, then I got some shorefront properties to sell you, and we'll have a good time. But yeah, it's for those. I tell people that you should budget for a nominal 5-year life cycle on stuff like that.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you can do upgrades to that machine in software that you don't have to manufacture new hardware to do.
Now, that also depends on whose box you bought. Ours, yes, absolutely. You know, we can. It is literally an industrial computer. If I got to replace the software, heck, if I did a full redesign and decided for whatever reason we wanted to abandon Windows 10 and go full Linux, we could do it. Might take a little bit of time and a little bit of effort and a few more curse words than I usually, well, no, I use a lot of them, so that wouldn't be me, but somebody. However, it can be done. And again, that's where you look. If you're dealing with an embedded system that is very purpose-built, basically a program microcontroller, then you've got less functionality in that regard. So, you know, caveat emptor. That's my Latin lesson for today.
Another aspect of longevity, David Stewart points out that it's not just transmitter manufacturers or tape recorder manufacturers or whoever manufacturers that need a succession plan. We have so many small contract engineering firms around the country, around the world. And if the main guy dies or becomes incapacitated, I get emails and calls every week from people looking for an engineer to do anything from routine maintenance to installing a transmitter. And there are places, even in this state, you just can't find anybody.
Right. And I mean, that comes back to one of the things, and I've done webinars on how to take a vacation from engineering, like we ever take vacations. But I've done whole sessions on, you know, just like if you are not the only guy for, and odds are no matter where you are, there's somebody else that does this. You may not like them, they may be kind of a jerk, but there's probably somebody else around. And it's really in our best interest as much as we can to sort of interface back and forth. So we have a plan like, hey, Joe, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, could you take over my clients till I get out of the hospital? You know, now if I die, well, Joe's got to make a decision whether he really wants those people or not, but that's a whole different topic.
Yep.
But yeah, you almost need both succession plans for worst case scenarios and to provide short-term coverage in case for whatever reason you're unable to do it.
Including documentation. So many places you go, there's no documentation.
I think we did I don't know how many times I've used the word document in discussions, but yeah, you know, and I am probably the one of the worst for it. So let's see if I can move this just enough. If you're looking right over my right elbow there at the fireproof box that holds all of our in-house documents, the stuff that theoretically will keep this place running if I get hit by a bus. And that's currently out there on the chair instead of in its insulated place in the basement sub room, because it's getting revised, refreshed, and I'm looking at documents in there that haven't been valid for over 10 years.
And who has your password should you get the bus?
Oh, real boss, my wife, the one who also holds the name to, or has her name on the insurance policy. I may not have thought that one out quite as well as I should have.
This is
Barry,
something.
Barry, I might mention that for regulatory reasons, it's good to have someone covering for you if you're on vacation as well.
Well, there is supposed to be an assistant chief operator, isn't there, Lark?
I'm not going to comment. I'm just saying that it would be good if you have somebody covering for you, because I would very much like to make your life easier. Having someone cover for you and giving appropriate responses really helps.
Yeah, good luck with that in some cases.
Well, Lark, you know, now that I'm well into my 80s, when I go on vacation, I just tell them, don't break anything. I'll be back in a week.
Of course, an
Talking about
advantage.
vacations, I ran into a situation once. I called tech support of a transmitter manufacturer who will go nameless, but they're not represented here today. It was a Saturday, and we were having problems with an install on a new transmitter. And of course, the particular company didn't have anyone there that could handle it, but they said, we'll have someone call you back. And sure enough, they did. Person who called back was a very experienced guy, except for one thing. He didn't know squat about that transmitter. An hour and a half later, after he led us down a wild goose chase, he finally said, I think I better go bone up on that transmitter. And that was the end of the conversation. So make sure that your replacement knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing challenge. I know with us, we do very much a first come, first serve. So when you call in, whoever's either got the fewest calls in the queue is going to get it. But the guys all know really quickly, and they've all been told, and I think they're pretty good at it, that if you're too far over your head, you know, most customers don't want to hear you leaping through the manual because they can leap through the manual just as well as you can. Now you get a lot of them, and these days, that holy smokes, I guess 50% of our customers have never opened a manual. And not one of ours anyway. I mean, maybe they open manual to other stuff, but yeah, so it's an ongoing challenge like that. But yeah, for example, I know if it's an old AM stuff, I'm probably going to go outside of customer service and just call, well, I'm going to call myself because I'm the guy that's worked on all that old stuff. But yeah, you kind of learn after a while who's best at what's and who you reach out to. And so we use that a lot to steer the calls. So, you know, if you got an HD problem, I'm probably going to send you to Nelson because Nelson knows that stuff better than anybody. Now, if you're a person who's has trouble with the accent, then I'll give you to maybe Alex. But again, I can shift it around a little bit depending on what's needed to be done.
Well, and one thing we have going for us these days with the modern technology, for those of us that do attempt to take vacation time, at least most everything's remotable. I mean, we can get into it, we can troubleshoot it. And in some cases, we can even, quote unquote, reboot it.
This is the part where we ask Lark to plug his ears while you suggest that there be a transmitter out there that is not remotable.
Oh, yeah, yeah, good point. But for the most part, we do have the ability to remote into a lot of this stuff and be able to take care of these issues without having to have somebody on site. Now, that's a different story if something fails.
Well, and that's
I'm thinking ahead for my my trip next week to Wisconsin, and if something fails here.
I will see you there, but absolutely. I mean, I will be gone. And one of the things that I will be doing, let's see if I can Just making sure, well, it doesn't really matter if I show you the IP address on this stuff because it's all on the studio WAN anyway. It's not like any of its external addresses. Let's put it up there, but and that's a really good example of another thing where you assign value. Whoops, screen 2 is that one there, where you assign value based on a lot to do with what features you've got on the gear. Let me see here. I'm just looking what I'm doing. Been killed by the several inches of rain we've gotten.
Mark, while you're gone to Wisconsin, who is going to review and sign your logs?
Actually, I have an assistant chief operator. Our program director is a young fella, very ambitious, and has not been afraid to jump in and learn this stuff. He will be covering for me while I'm gone. Of course, it's only a week, thank goodness, but
Well, we just wanted to make sure that Lark didn't have to keep his fingers in his ears too long.
oh, yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, you can take them out now.
What is this thing called vacation?
So
That's what I used to say, but my wife somehow she's kind of beating it into me that I have to take vacation.
See here. So my version of a vacation typically involves logging into this stuff remotely instead of going to it directly. All right. Hey, look
Have
at
you
that.
ever gone on vacation without your laptop?
No.
I
So,
never have either. Have laptop will travel.
So my ex-wife got upset with me one day because she goes, we just come back from 2 weeks of camping. And I said, yeah. And she goes, we were in a tent in the woods. And I said, yeah. And she goes, you're the only person on the planet that would insist on a campground that had Wi-Fi.
Vacation actually was an old song by Connie Francis.
So, and the only reason I bring this screen up is because at the moment I have got the GM of our station on his way back from the Nautel factory with this particular power supply, hopefully in the passenger seat of his car. And so you know what I'm going to be doing as soon as we get off this call.
Turning the modulation down.
Now, why would I turn the modulation down? We've got RDS and 2 SCAs running. It's right where it should be. Oh, and plus the stereo pilot.
Has the rain stopped up there?
I do not know. I'm hiding in the basement. I can't really see from here. I think it has. But yeah, this comes back to the advantage that we've got, that we can access this stuff from pretty much wherever we are. And because I'm using real VNC, I can get to it even if I'm on my cell phone. It's a little harder to see, but it works. So that definitely is a big deal for making sure, again, not just for the, what do you call, the having backup systems, but having the ability to get to it yourself if you really need to.
Oh, and for those that may not have these, I use these web power switches a lot. It allows you to web in and be able to actually power cycle various pieces of equipment if you need to.
If you scroll up in the chat, Mike Tosh put a link for an IP-based AC power controller there with 5 outlets. So, yep, absolutely. That's one of the things that I said we do not have that I really wish we did. Not so much for this, but in the event that we ever manage to lock up the barracks, it would be nice to be able to power cycle it remotely.
Yeah, I use those also at, shall we say, remote sites. And what's nice is you can also set even the inexpensive ones for pinging 8.8.8.8 or wherever you like. And if it doesn't see it, and it checks and says, how long do you want me to wait? And then it will reboot it automatically. That is a handsome feature.
I'm going to step out of camera for a moment. But the other thing I use a lot is these guys. They're made by a company called, probably Chinese company, so they're probably phoning home every time I turn them on or off, but it's called Meross, MEROSS. And I like these ones because they tie into my smart home devices. So, okay, she's unplugged. So I can say, you know, Alexa, turn plant heaters on or turn humidifiers off or whatever. And it switches all these outlets automatically. I've gotten quite spoiled by that. So yeah, I mean, and again, I can IP into them on my phone and just physically turn them on and off by clicking on the phone app. So now I think about it, one of those may need to go up to the transmitter site. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, I had to restart one of my remote controls this morning. It wasn't allowing me to connect to it. So I just jumped into, I used the DLI brand web power switches. There's like 6 switched outlets and 2 that aren't, and you know, a quick power cycle in the program, and then I was into it. So,
yeah,
you know, for those that don't have those devices, it's well worth the money to have them at your remote sites. It's just another area of being able to make sure you can get into things.
Yeah.
Now, some guys will go to the extent of putting the web power switch. They'll actually have a switch coming right off their ISP connection, and then they'll split out of that. One goes to their router for the site, and the other one will go directly to the power switch.
Right.
And so, you know, if your router has a problem, and don't do like I have power cycled the router and made the terrible mistake of just turning it off, not allowing it to come back up. And then it's windshield time.
And that does happen too. Now, Dan made a good point about using, I got to get back to the chat again, using Chrome Remote Desktop to get to the Office PC to use TeamViewer. And we've switched from TeamViewer to Real VNC, as TeamViewer, at least up here, has started to get a little snarky about what they consider commercial use, which apparently would include radio stations, nonprofit or not. So yeah, we've made the change, but that's a good way of getting there is yeah, remote desktop of various kinds.
If I can just add, be careful which remote desktop you use, specifically like using RDP and stuff, since that port is out there, a lot of ransomwares and stuff are targeting it and so forth.
Yeah, that's also a good point. And I mean, I know, I don't know if Wayne's still here, but if you ever get a chance to watch Wayne talking about IT security and peeling the onion, the different layers, so to speak, is it's quite enlightening. And yeah, I've gotten to talk to different folks who have been hit by ransomware, and it is not something you recover. Even if you've got fully air-gapped off-site backups that you can, you know, isolate a machine, get a clean machine and come in and strip it all down and rebuild it one at a time, it's still a pain in the rear.
Have any of your transmitters been hit with ransomware? And you don't have to give names.
So just for grins, actually, I don't mind giving names because we set this one up when we had the office in Quincy just as a test. We put an NV5 on the open internet shortly after somebody who will remain nameless published the kernel password on a list server. And just for grins, so we put it up. Now we provide unique kernel passwords with every single transmitter, but then we didn't. Everybody got a generic password. Somebody published it on the open internet. A week later, we plugged this thing on, bypassed all the routers, and just plugged it in. 19 seconds. That's how long it took from plugging it in, turning it on, and it trying to dial banks with a DDoS.
And how much damage was done?
Oh, none. We unplugged it as soon as we were doing, it was a purposeful test. We were actually watching the traffic at the time. So as far as we're aware, none. They didn't do anything to the transmitter.
One of our affiliates transmitter was hacked into and a whole bunch of garbage put into the boot sector on the transmitter. You couldn't access the transmitter via the web GUI.
Yep.
And had to have the manufacturer go in, and we were very fortunate. They were actually able to SSH into the transmitter and clean up the mess and get it back to normal.
Is that one of ours or somebody else's?
No, it was somebody else's.
Okay. It doesn't matter. We all have the same basic setup as far as that goes. The same holes are there.
Yeah, but one of the things they told me to make, in fact, one of the guys I dealt with he said, shut down ports 20 and 22.
Yep.
And he said, you'd be amazed at how many of these individuals will exploit those ports.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's beyond that. I mean, I beat this drum over and over and over, and we've done more sessions on IT security. But if you're not putting everything behind a firewall, hardware, software, and, again, I like to lock everything down. I mean, my in-house, I called the ISP not too long ago for some support, and they said, well, we need you to turn something on. And I said, I got everything turned on. Oh, wait, let me turn the firewall off. My ISP couldn't see. They could see the traffic. They couldn't see any devices connected to the network.
Do you run into any of your transmitters that still have the default stuff on them?
Oh, shit, yeah.
Still?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I will let's just do a really quick here. I'll tell you what, take a walk with me through the wild, wild web.
More ferrites, more ferrites.
Let's see here. Okay, is it first off? Is it? Let me hit
Showdown.
share first. That's where we're going, folks. All right, showdown.io. So let's take a quick peek here. I'm not going to bother logging in. As you can tell, I search for things on a regular basis. So let's see. We are down to 8 at the moment. But let's take a peek. That is Frontier. I think that is probably one of our backup servers in-house. Yeah, that's what that is. So that is not going to do us any good for that. I know what it is, but let's take a peek. That's probably, okay, port 80 open on this one. That's a Microsoft server. It's got something on it with our name on it. And even more, what I get a kick out of, less with the transmitters. Let's jump down. So this is a Burke Autopilot down around Huntsville, Alabama, that's visible at least. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get into it or not. Probably not at that point. Showdown's changed their server a little bit too. So that's a Burke Plus Connect, Burke Plus Connect, Burke Plus Connect. What do we have here? That's a Nautel server, so that's more of our own in-house stuff. I got to talk to our IT people. There's a lot of things I'm seeing I shouldn't be seeing. But
Well,
yeah,
last time I took a stroll on Showdown, I saw a fair number of EAS boxes.
Yep. Let's see, port 80. Yeah, they have changed the way they do this. There we go. Oh, no, I'll have to log in to get to those. All right. So there are a few there. The funny thing always used to be, and this is the audio codecs are the ones that I get the biggest kick out of. So there's 1,900 barracks boxes that are visible on the internet. Now, of those, I can guarantee you that some number of them are running okay, so this one does not have the default hardware, but some of them are running pre-2017 software, which means that they are not firewalled at all. There's no protection, no password, nothing. So let's skip back, but yeah, I mean, this is just, like I say, I get less, I don't really care about the codecs. I use them more to illustrate the point that a lot of people are leaving stuff wide open. But if I see our transmitters, I will actively go in with the default usernames and passwords and try to hack into them just to see if I can. And then I'll send them an email and say, excuse me, but you need to fix this. And the funny thing is, the one guy I did that to a couple of months ago, I didn't get any response. And about a week or two later, I checked and I saw it again, and I picked up the phone and I called him. I said, hey, this is Jeff from Nautel. I sent you an email a couple of weeks ago about seeing your transmitter. He goes, I thought it was spam. And I said, it wasn't spam. You're wide open. You change your default, would you? And that was the whole conversation right there.
As Wayne showed us last week, that is something that everyone should be checking from time to time. Every time you add a new box to the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, that, and it all comes back to, again, the longevity thing, because if you're keeping this stuff protected from the people that want to do harm, then it's going to live a lot longer, both with physical inspections of your ground system and the occasional scan of your IT network, or, you know, your IP infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, we're running way late and I've got a power supply to go replace.
Well, Jeff, we sure, as always, appreciate your words of wisdom or just jocularity.
Verbal meandering.
Hey.
Hey, on the plus side, I've got my little affidavit filled out. I've got a negative COVID test from yesterday afternoon, and I will be on an airplane on Saturday for the first time in over a year and a half.
Is this your third shot?
Second. We only do 2 up here. Well, and I'll rephrase the second one. I'm not saying we won't do boosters, but my second one was just done in July or August. So it's not that, not far enough back to need a third one. Anyway, Mark, I'll probably see you in Madison. Awesome. All right. Well, on that note, folks, thanks very much. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jeff.
See y'all.